Courtside Monday.
Tim Johnsen joining the show. Tim, welcome in.
What's up, Chris? Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, man. No, thanks for joining me. Full disclosure, if I bring you on, I'm gonna rib you a little bit. Rib City needs to know that I brought on one of its favorite podcast hosts, and he's like, "What? You want to have me on? Why?" Because I like you, Tim. You're a good guy.
Well, I appreciate it, man. Here I am thinking I'm a nobody, and you're making me feel like somebody. You're such a good guy.
Well, you do have the Busted Bucket podcast. You guys can go find that wherever you listen to your podcast. You can find them on Twitter as well. But if you are listening, we were just talking about the Blazer bench there with the friend of the show, Crazy Tom, trying to tell me that it's okay that the Blazers bench is struggling because, back in 2014, the Dallas Mavericks beat the Blazers when their bench only scored 15 points. Like, no, are you watching the same games we are, guys? The bench isn't that great. So what's your take on what's going on with the roster here and the bench specifically, Tim?
Well, here's the problem is our bench only scored 3 points, which is a far cry from what Dallas did. And not to take away anything from what these players are doing, but they've got to be better. And as far as bench play goes, I mean, that wasn't the main issue that I saw in the last game. And what I know you want to talk about the bench, but for me, it was actually the simple things. It was the little things like passing and ball protection. It seemed like they just couldn't do it for some reason. Like they came into this game and it all went out the window. I mean, some of these passes were so errant. It made me wonder who they were throwing it to and bouncing off, other guys' feet like that. You can't do that. That's what I saw.
Yeah, it's those mental errors, those execution things, as Chauncey would say. It's a bit of a mental slippage, if you will. So this to me then comes down to coaching a little bit, and you've seen it, as you said, the being prepared for the game, making these slight mental errors. And I also think with the way the rotation itself is being run right now, I personally, regardless of the outcome, just knowing that you have limited bodies and you need someone to take the pressure off your starters, like I think it's almost inexcusable that Keon Johnsen plays less than 5 minutes in a game like that.
Well, I agree, but who is that? Besides Keon, who is that going to be? I mean, going into the season, you were hoping it was going to be Shaedon Sharpe. Am I right?
Yes. But at the same time, my argument here is if you're not giving these guys any run, especially in a situation where you're limited on bodies and they can take that run, how did they get prepared? There's no run like game run. Practice doesn't do it. You know what I mean?
I am in 100% agreement with you, Chris. But the problem is, I mean, you're playing guys like, Summer League MVP Watford, which I personally thought he would get more run this season, being that he was Summer League MVP. Sharpe, he had all of the 3 points, which that's awesome, but he needs to be a little more efficient. But then you get to start, you start thinking about, how much should we expect from a rookie? And then you got Johnsen, who doesn't get much run. What did you say, 5 minutes?
Yep.
I mean, that's not good.
Yeah.
You can't survive off that. Drew puts in solid energy minutes, if you will, and same with Jabari in my mind. But none of those guys, besides Johnsen and Sharpe, am I counting on to get me buckets.
Yes. Now that I can agree with, because they are struggling. But that's why I argue, just get them on the floor, get them run, get them that confidence, let them go get you buckets. Because I mean, even if they have a full lineup right now, it's not like you can really trust Winslow to go get you a ton of buckets. You still don't know if Gary Payton is going to be a bucket getter for you. He really hasn't been his entire career. Nasir, he'll go get you some buckets, but he's not playing. Does sound like he's getting a lot closer to his return, which is nice. That's just why I'd like to see the bench get out there. It's just unfortunate that you got to see right now the starters playing 40 minutes a night. That's a recipe for just long-term failure, in my opinion.
Well, it's unsustainable.
Yes.
That's what you got to take away from that. That is completely unsustainable. And I think what you're hoping is that Sharpe ends up coming into his own and starts carving out some more minutes for himself and being more efficient. I mean, talk about efficiency. I think now I'm going to preface this with the fact that I am not a numbers guy by any means, but I am sitting here hoping and praying that Anthony Simons gets a little more efficient, because it seems, now again, I'm an eye test guy here, but it seems like you either get all or very little when Simon's on the court. I just feel like if he was a little more efficient, we'd be in a better spot. But going back to the bench, I'm glad you brought up Gary Payton Jr. or the second, whatever you want to call him.
We got to set the record straight for all our listeners. It is Gary Payton II, because if you didn't know, Gary Payton Jr. is actually Gary Payton II's brother.
There we go. See, you learn something new every day.
There you go.
So I feel like going into the season, us as fans, because that's what I am, we had unrealistic expectations surrounding Gary Payton II. He played well in Golden State. We knew he was a defensive stopper, but he's not a bucket getter per se. And I feel like a lot of us felt like, and myself included, I'm throwing myself in here, I'm throwing myself under the bus. I think a lot of us felt like he was going to come out here and make a difference on both ends of the court. And I feel like that's not going to happen, number one. And number two, the unfortunate fact surrounding Gary Payton II is that he hasn't been healthy. And for Blazer fans, that is the worst thing we can have on the roster right now. And I hate that I'm saying this, because I appreciate everything he does, but that is the last thing we need on this roster.
Yeah. Availability is the greatest ability, right? As the old saying goes.
Right.
When it comes to, availability and the players who have been playing this year, we got into this debate, Preston and I, the other day, and I want to get your take as a fan. For you, who has been your MVP of the Blazers to this point?
I mean, it's hard not to say Dame, am I right? But I also think that Anthony kind of carried us a little while. But all that being said, for me, it's Jeremy Grant. And I think a lot of people didn't realize how good he was going to be for us. But this dude comes out and puts it on for the city. I mean, talk about playing for your hometown, am I right? This guy is amazing. And I hope that he ends up finishing his career as a Blazer.
Well, he has stated that he doesn't want to go anywhere, hopes to re-sign that fat deal when he can. And I would agree with you. That was my pick. I think it's been Jeremy Grant as well. He's been better than advertised. He's been bringing it offensively. He's been probably the go-to defender. He's still not a great
he does
rebounder,
everything,
but he's doing everything, right?
I was going to say the only knock is that he's not a great rebounder. And on the positive side, though, is we've got Josh Hart picking up the slack, which is crazy to me because I'm such an old school basketball guy that Josh Hart is a guard to me. I know he's playing the three, but this guy what is he averaging? I'm not a stats guy, but he's got to be averaging close to 7, 8 boards a game.
He's filling the sheet up, that's for sure.
It's just ridiculous. But yeah, for me, it's Jeremy Grant. That guy's the MVP of this Blazers season so far. He's kept us in so many games. He's hit big game winners. The guy's an animal. I love him.
Yes, it's hard not to love him. And yes, you're right. Josh Hart averaging 8.3 rebounds this season. Unfortunately, could be a trade chip for this team just because of the financials that this team does see in the future. They're going to have to lock up Jeremy Grant. They're going to have to maybe move some pieces around to bring some talent in. One of those pieces could be Josh Hart, which I think would be unfortunate because as you're alluding to, and I think Rip City would agree, they've all fallen in love with him. But regardless of who you might have to trade out, as a fan or just in general, are there any names that you look at that you would like to see the Blazers at least show some interest in?
Chris, I don't really have names per se. I mean, there's an archetype that I would like to see, and that's a big. I want to see more big. I called in your show maybe a month or two ago, and I said it was after we played Denver, and I brought up the fact that we were so light on bigs, on big bodies, and I just feel like we need another big body because we alluded to it earlier in this show. I almost said episode. In this show, it's not sustainable to essentially be running three bigs. You got, and Grant to me is an undersized big. He's 6'8". Nurk really isn't 7 feet, 6'11", but we'll call him a 7-footer. He's the tallest guy on the roster getting playing time. I just feel like you need another rim protector out there. I want somebody who can do a little bit of everything on both sides of the ball. Somebody like a John Collins.
Yeah.
But, good luck getting John Collins. But, somebody like that. I want a big power forward. And then at that point, you could slide Jeremy over to the 3 if you're talking about trading Josh Hart, which I'm completely against because Josh Hart, forgive the cliche here, but Josh Hart is the heart of this team right now. I think you slide Jeremy over and, getting rid of Josh Hart. The thing is, I don't think you're only going to get rid of Josh Hart. I think you've got a backlog of guards and wings, and I think you're probably looking at somebody like a Keon Johnson getting moved or maybe a Justice Winslow. But I think that, in turn, is going to free up minutes for somebody like Shaedon Sharpe to start figuring out a little more while he's on the court. So, somebody like a power forward. I think that's, to answer your question, I think I want a big power forward who can bang down low, who can block, protect the rim, and do a little bit offensively as well.
Hey, that's a fair answer, and I am personally also a fan of John Collins. I think the dip in his numbers is less a dip in his actual production and more of just the circumstances being dealt him in Atlanta there. So yeah, I would love that. How you get it, I don't know. That's why I'm not Joe Cronin. But anyway, Tim Johnsen joining us right now, host of the Busted Bucket podcast. You can find him, follow him on Twitter at Busted Bucket, and there in his Twitter account you'll have the links and everything to go download and listen to his podcast. It's a great podcast. And recently on that podcast, Tim, you had Adam Drexler on, son of the great Clyde Drexler, who just joined us the last hour on the Rip City Drive. For those of you who missed it, that video will be uploading to YouTube hopefully within about the next 10-15 minutes. We'll get it out to you. But you asked him, just like everybody else, kind of wanting to know the relationship that Clyde had with the team and, Dame, et cetera. Kind of what were your takeaways from getting a chance to talk to Adam?
I see you research, I appreciate that. We did have Adam on, just like that's part of our shows. We like to peel back the curtain a little bit by getting our guests on. But, the main takeaways that I got from Adam in regards to the whole situation with Dame breaking Clyde's record is that Clyde wanted it to be all about Dame. Adam said that Clyde didn't want to go to the game or make one of those videos like all the players and coaches did, because he wanted it to be about Dame and let Dame have his day. But what he did do is call Dame and Chauncey personally to congratulate them and talk to them, one-on-one sort of deal, which, Adam said that's just the way Clyde is. Clyde is a guy that kind of likes to keep to himself. He doesn't like to put himself out there too much. And, I honestly, I think that probably is the better way to go about it. I know us as fans feel like maybe Clyde has forgotten about the city or doesn't like the city, but the truth of the matter is that's just not the case. According to Adam, Clyde talks about Portland literally every single day. Yeah. And so, besides that and the fact that Clyde routinely does karate in the garage with Kiki Vandaway.
What a nugget.
Yeah, those were the main takeaways of our last show.
That's a good takeaway. And Adam obviously knows his father very well. And that's basically what Clyde said on the River City Drive today with Chad and Dwight. It was just that, the reason there's not as more of a relationship is just because, one side hasn't reached out to form that relationship. And he actually talked a little bit about how Portland in general, not just with him, look back, they don't have a great history of having a good relationship with former players, bringing them back in as ambassadors or giving them positions within the organization to help formulate those bonds and build a future. Unlike a team like Dallas, where he said basically if you wore the Maverick jersey once, Mark Cuban is indebted to you and will offer you a job if you want it. So he talked about that, and to be fair to Clyde, Tim, he talked about that without trying to be negative about the franchise, because you can tell that this city still holds a very, very soft spot in his heart.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I can just throw out a quick PSA real quick, Rip City, we got to stop hating on Clyde, man. This guy is so loyal to his hometown in Houston. He loves his hometown. We all would do the same, right? And if we never got contacted by, the city that we spend a lot of time in, professionally, then you know what? That's just the way it is. I think Clyde deserves maybe a little more respect, maybe a little more fanfare around here.
Yep, and he also said that records are meant to be broken, and he's glad that his record was broken by someone as respectable and professional and loved as Damian Lillard.
That's another thing we talked about on the show, is that the similarities between this past offseason and the season that, Clyde left, where it's uncanny, because, Dame was talking about, make a move or I'm gone sort of deal. And Clyde was basically like, look, if you're going in the direction of rebuilding, you got to trade me to a contender, because that's what I'm after. And the similarities between the two are so uncanny. It's funny, man. It's really funny. And to hear that the two of them actually have a pretty good relationship is pretty heartwarming. Apparently they talk all the time.
Yeah, I'm glad you point that out too, because right now you have recency bias and everyone loves Dame, as they should. But the similarities that you just mentioned, yeah, they are very uncanny when they get down to it. Last question for you though, because everyone has to have a hat in this debate. It's twofold. First off, who is your Blazer GOAT?
Chris Burkhardt.
Oh, Tim Johnsen.
It's funny. The GOAT debate is funny. Whether you're talking about your own franchise or the NBA in general, you can't compare different eras. And that's kind of the takeaway that I want everyone to go away with here. Look, we had your buddy Dwight James on a couple years ago, and he wouldn't say Clyde or Dame. He actually went with Bill Walton. And so I understand it. I understand where you can, choose either one of the three. But for me, just because of the sentimental reasons that I hold dear in my heart, it's probably always going to be Clyde, because that's who I grew up watching.
Right.
But that's not to say Dame isn't amazing.
No, that's saying you choose Clyde does not devalue or diminish Dame in any way, and it shouldn't. I'm with you. I'm also Team Clyde in that debate right now, but I definitely think it can be Dame when it's all said and done. Then the second part of that question, and it's going to be a much easier one for you to answer, and hopefully it's not going to help, because my man Preston is going to hate you for this. But who is the NBA GOAT?
The NBA GOAT is the same guy that my father gave me my middle name after. That's MJ, man. It's MJ. It's got to be MJ.
I'm with you on that one too. Preston, note back here, he's just too young. He's one of those LeBron stans. I get it. It's okay. LeBron's great too, but I'm also Team MJ. All right, before we let you go, Tim, real quick, tell all our listeners where they can follow you on social and where they can find your podcast.
Yeah, man. I mean, we're mainly on Twitter. We're also on TikTok, IG, Facebook, but Twitter's the main one. Follow us at Busted Bucket. Our show is all about peeling back the curtain, just having fun. It's basically like cracking a beer with your buddies and talking hoops. And that's all it is, man. We just have a good time.
All right. Well, it's a great listen. It's how you and I kind of started our relationship here, was via the podcast realm. That's why I wanted to have you on, man, because a lot of the listeners out there, they're just like you. They're a fan, and they just like talking hoop. So I appreciate you taking the time, and you didn't bomb, so you don't have to worry. That means I will hold up my end of the bargain. We will get you in the studio here at some point in the future. All right, Tim?
Perfect. Hey, Chris, before we go, I appreciate you making me feel like I am somebody.
Oh, you are somebody. You are the man, Tim. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll talk to you soon, bud.
I appreciate it.